So what I'm going to do for the lighting is that I'm going to be, firstly, let me just go ahead and go back to my word properties. We can press this cross button right here, and so that we can basically remove the texture, remove the HDRI. Click this environment texture and click disconnect, right? Or you could click remove as well. It's the same thing for us. And I'm going to select this color right here, not the yellow dot, this color right here, color picker, and I can just set it to black, completely black, so that we basically have no lighting before we start, because that's what I want, right? That's what I prefer. I prefer starting with like a very dark image so that we can, with a completely black image basically, so we can like do all the lighting ourselves. So now what I can do is I can go ahead and click add light, and we can just add area lights. Okay, so I usually like to do the lighting with area lights, and I usually like to start with a 3-point lighting setup, and then I can just go ahead and make some tweaks and stuff like that. 3-point lighting setup, I think, should always be your starting point. You shouldn't like follow the rule like very seriously, because oftentimes what happens is that you get better results with obviously more lights than 3. So that's what I want you guys to do. Plus, I mean, in art, there's like nothing wrong and right. You can always justify your creative decision. And I actually want you guys to like sort of take your own creative decisions and not follow rules blindly. So this is going to be our fill light, right? I am assuming that you know what the 3-point lighting setup is. It's basically a fill light, a key light, and a rim light. I usually like to have more than one rim lights, but yeah, the rule basically says that you should have one rim light. Anyway, let me set this power to something like 30. Okay. Now, the bigger your object is, the more power you're gonna need, obviously. So if we were, let's say, if we hadn't scaled it down, scaled the watch down, then we would have to use like a very high power, and that's not what I want. So that's why I like to work with everything on a smaller scale, so we can like have smaller values and more manageable values. So I think that should be fine. Actually, you know what? Before setting up the lighting, let me go ahead and add a basic camera, so that we can sort of have an idea of where we're gonna be looking at the camera from, right? So just go to add camera and click this button right here to go inside the camera. Click this button right here to open this menu, and I'm pretty sure you know what I'm doing, but you can just lock the camera to view. And I think I'm gonna place it somewhere here, something like that. I think something like that should be a good starting position. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to go to my output properties and set the resolution Y and X both to 2000. Oops, not 200, 2000. Because I want it to be a square image basically, and that should be good. Now we can unlock the camera to view, and we can also create another viewport. Basically right click this and click vertical split, and basically the second viewport we're going to use to basically place our lights, and the first viewport is going to be obviously to look at how the scene looks. And you can press Ctrl B and set the render region and zoom it in like that. So that's the basic setup that I usually do before starting the lighting part. So I'm just going to be closing this as well and turning both of these off, so just so I can like see how it's going to look purely. Okay, so I'm just going to select the light, and I'm going to move it in the X and Y axes. So I think I should have this light somewhere here, facing this part right here. Okay, so it's going to be filling in some of the parts which are going to be relatively dark. But now what I can do is I can press Shift D, duplicate this, and place it here and rotate it like that. Something like that should be good. So right now, one problem which you're going to be noticing is the fact that the watch is very, very dark. And the reason for that is because it's very shiny right now. So what we can do is we can just select any of the materials and basically increase the roughness slightly. And so you're going to see the more roughness we increase, the more sort of brighter it's going to become, right? So you want to set it to a point where it's not too bright, but like, yeah, just set it to a relative, just eyeball it and just see what looks good. Set the value to 50, and so you're going to see that the front is pretty well lit. The only problem is the glass, which I personally don't like. So I'm just going to hide it and see how it looks. So you're going to see without the glass, it looks slightly better. So I'm just going to hide the glass from the render and the viewport as well. But yeah, so this part looks good, right? This part looks pretty good. Also, before we move on, I'm just going to go to my render properties, go down to color management, and just set the look to high contrast, because that's just what I want, and I want to set that before so we can, like, basically make all our adjustments according to that. Okay, so we are basically going to be lighting individual sections of the watch separately, right? So this part of the light is this part of the watch is lit pretty well, right? This back part is also lit like relatively well. This part is lit relatively well. The bottom and the top are basically not lit at all, right? So now we're going to be working on those. So Shift D once again, duplicate it, place it right here, right? Then what we can do is we can just do Alt R to reset the rotation, right? So it's basically facing down, and we can move it up like that. And then we can place it, basically eyeball it to any position that looks good. I am going to be reducing the roughness of this a little bit. I think 0.2 should be the sweet spot, but then again, you have to make sure that you always, you also set basically both of the materials to have the same roughness. Or I mean, it depends on what you're going for, but I think in my situation, it's good to have the same roughness. I think something like that should be a good lighting position. You can bring it forward or backward, or what you can do is you can just scale it up in any axes. Again, lighting is something which is completely subjective, and it's a artistic thing, so I would recommend you to just do whatever you want to do and not follow any rules. So yeah, you should know the basic rules, like 3-point lighting setup. You should always start with that, but then you should work your way up to like sort of just better lighting. Yeah. So I think the lighting is coming together pretty well. I am not liking this part being very dark. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be positioning this light a little separately, maybe something like that might be good. Yeah, something like that might be good, honestly. One thing which I can do is I can go back to my render settings, go down and go down to your view transform, and set the look to medium high contrast, because maybe high contrast was a little too much, or yeah, I think medium high contrast is better. Also, I'm not really sure about this to have like the watch having two colors. I think if the watch is like just golden, I think that's gonna look better. So I'm probably just gonna change it back to silver. Actually, no, not silver. My bad, golden. So select this. All the silver parts, I'm gonna set them back to golden. Set it back to golden. And lastly, set this part back to golden as well. Perfect. Now the back is actually, yeah, the back also needs to be set to golden then, because otherwise it's going to be non-uniform, which is not going to look good. Yeah, perfect. I think this honestly looks better. And also I don't necessarily like the color of the watch as of yet. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open up the shader editor down there, and let me just tweak the color a little bit and see what looks better. Yeah, I think this color looks a lot better. Yeah, this color looks better. That one was more towards the yellow side. This is more towards the orange side. Or actually, yeah, this color looks good. One thing I want to do is I want to basically select all the lights. Actually, not all the lights. I'm going to have to do that individually, because I was assuming that all the lights are going to have the same power, but they don't. So I just want to bump up the lighting intensity of all of them by like 20. So something like this, and this one as well. 20. Okay, so right now the face of the watch is like pretty overexposed. So I'm gonna be selecting the material, and we can maybe make the base color like a little darker. Nah, that doesn't work. We're gonna have to tweak the lighting. So select this light and maybe move it around. Take it a little towards the back, maybe. Yeah. Also, we can also reduce the roughness of this. Okay. And also remove any maps from the metallic, because I don't think we need maps I think we just work with like a basic value. I think that's gonna look better. Set the metallic to 1, or not 1 actually, something like that. Increase the roughness slightly, and basically go to this material, set it to metallic, roughness, reduce the roughness. I think that looks a lot more realistic, doesn't it? Yeah. Maybe increase the roughness a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Even this part, reduce the roughness slightly so that it can look better. This material, I'm gonna click this 9 button right here, so we can like make individual tweaks to this material. So we can reduce the roughness a little more and bring the base color down and make it a little darker. Same with this. Make it a little darker. Actually, that's a little too dark, I think. Something like that should be good. Okay, so the watch is coming together pretty well. I might need to tweak the lighting a little more. Or you can also just scale the light down. This way it sort of directly affects like a little lesser portion of the render. And increase the roughness a little bit. Increase the base color. Yeah. Actually no. Increase the roughness. I think that looks good. Yeah. Again, all this part, this whole part is just trial and error, and I would recommend you to like sort of spend a lot of time on this, sort of trying to see what looks good and what doesn't, and also look at it from different angles and different perspectives, just to make sure that it looks good from every perspective. Now, one problem with this is that the back is not lit at all, so I'm going to be basically copying this light, Shift D, Shift Z to move it in the X and Y axes, not the Z axis, and then I can go to the top view and rotate it like that and put the light on the back. Now, the reason why I'm not lighting it directly from the front is because obviously it's not going to look good. The reason why it's not going to look good is shadows create depth, right? And we want depth in our scene. That's very essential. So also this has silver material, so I'm going to apply the golden one to this. But yeah, let me actually show you an example. So if I just apply a straight light to this from here, you're going to see that there's no depth, there's no shadow. So it doesn't look good, right? But if I undo it and have it from the side, you're going to see that there is some shadow, which creates depth, right? So that obviously looks better. So again, it comes down to personal preference, but generally it is in the 3D community, in the art community, it is accepted that if your image has more shadows, I mean, not necessarily more shadows, but like if your image uses shadows correctly, then it's gonna have more depth, right? It's gonna give the illusion of depth more, right? So that's how it works. But yeah, I think our lighting is looking pretty good. I am gonna do some tweaks, some adjustments to this, but I think for the most part we are essentially just done. Let me select this inner part and bring the metallic down and bring the roughness up. I think that's better because now we can like clearly see, because before that it was pretty unclear, so I don't want that. And now we can go ahead and let's turn on the guides and go back to the camera and just inspect it, make sure it looks good from all angles. Let's see. Yeah, I think the render looks pretty good. And now we can probably just make some final tweaks and then move on to the animation. Alright, so I pulled up the original render for reference, and honestly this one looks a lot better, and we're going to be sort of exploring the reasons why, and so that we can sort of work on this to make this look better, right? So the first thing I'm noticing is that this has a lot more contrast and a lot more vibrance, and that's because this render has actually been color graded in Premiere Pro. So we're going to do that after we're done. So don't expect this to look exactly the same as this, because we are going to be doing some post-processing after we complete rendering this. Okay, but the main thing which I'm concerned about, honestly, is the fact that this part, one sec, I don't know if I can zoom in. I don't think I can zoom in on this. This part right here, the inside part, it sort of has like a feeling of depth for some reason, which this doesn't. It looks very flat, it looks very bad. If you look at this, this has more depth, right? And I think part of the reason for that is because these what do you call it, these numbers, I don't know if they're called numbers or whatever, But yeah, they're golden, and I think it adds more depth. In ours, they're just black. So we're gonna make them golden. So just select any one of them, and let me actually switch back to one viewport. So you can just right click the middle area, join areas, and then just click this. So like whichever one you click is gonna disappear, and the only one you're gonna have is the other one. Okay, so what I can do is I can just simply go ahead and select these, and we can just, instead of this silver material, we can apply the golden material to this. Perfect. That looks better, hopefully. This one too. But still, you're gonna see that there is like it's sort of lacking depth for some reason. And I think another reason for that is because these actually wait, let me open this again. Let me go back to my camera and let's see. So I think part of the reason is because the focal length of this is lesser. That plays a major role in this as well. So let me go ahead and change the focal length of our camera. Let me get the camera out of the collection. And I'm just going to name this collection watch, just so we can sort of organize this more, and select all of these, and then you can right click and new collection and just drag all of them into that collection and call this lights, just so that we can have our scene a little more organized. Focal length, let me set this to something like 35. Okay, that's better. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some depth of field to this. Actually, not right now. We're not going to add depth of field right now. We're going to do that later on when we're done with the animation. Because obviously this is an animation, right? The focal point is not going to be the same throughout the animation. It's going to keep changing. Especially because we're going to be doing these effects. Let me show you. We're going to be doing like these blur in effects like this. So the image is going to start out blurry and then it's going to become clear as we go on. So for those effects, we're going to have to wait to add motion blur. Sorry, not motion blur, depth of field. Okay. Another thing which I'm noticing is the fact that if I go back, you're going to see, oh, okay, I think I basically found the main reason why we're lacking depth. That's because of this light right here, because this is like pretty direct on it, and that's why it's not letting any shadows to form. So let me actually go back to my dual viewport setting, setting, yeah, and I can just select this light and move it across a little bit, something like that, and then rotate it even more, something like that. Maybe make it bigger. Or you know what else we could do? We could probably just put this light in the front. Nope, that was not a good idea. Let's do some trial and error. I think we should place it somewhere here. I think that looks better. There's some depth. And we can then probably move this light. Yeah, now I think that is probably the best way to go. Yeah, now I think we can sort of have more depth relative to before. We can maybe reduce the intensity of this light a little bit, something like that. Yeah, but again, obviously there is going to be some difference between this render and the one I showed you before, and that is because I spent a lot more time on that one, right? Because like when I'm making these tutorials, my goal is mainly just to show you guys how to do stuff, and you guys are supposed to like spend more time on this, obviously, because yeah, I don't want to waste you guys' time in like minor adjustments and stuff like that, right? Because when I'm actually making like a render, I spend like at least 1 or 2 hours just to sort of make minor adjustments and like stuff like that. So I would recommend you to do that as well. But I think it looks pretty good. It looks pretty similar to the original render which I showed you before. Obviously the original one looks better because of the color grading, but apart from that, I think we are pretty similar. So I think we can move on to the next step, which is going to be the animation.